what happens. Welcome, everyone, to Ladder Daily Digest. We honor creators, and on Tuesday nights, we have Tuesdays with Tim, where we come into Tim Rathbone's living room virtually. Sometimes we're inundated with kittens, sometimes we're not. But anyhow, we thought we would talk about the impact that LGBTQIA plus has had on basically civilization throughout history. And Brother Jones first came up with the idea because he discovered something, and he'd like to share it with us right now. And that's gonna start off our discussion.
And I hope my sound is okay. Sorry if it's not, but I was talking with Tim a few days ago offline, and I had learned something that a day or two earlier that I didn't know about and thought it was interesting. This relates to the developments in artificial intelligence, AI, everywhere in the news. It's going to change. It's going to rock our world, whether we like it or not. It's already doing that. But most of you should be familiar with the player Altman, the head of OpenAI ChatGPT. The last few weeks made a few comments about having a child, a new baby boy or something like that, and it never crossed my mind that that he's a gay man, that he's openly gay and he's married to a man. Back when he said he had a child, I thought, oh, he and his wife had a child. That was immediately what I thought. But his wife, must not like the public eye. She's never seen. Well, it turns out that he's gay and he's married to a man, and they had a child via surrogate or something. Well, and it struck me that Sam and many other gay figures in history and current world developments are gay people. What is it, 5 or 6 or 7, 8 years ago when Tim Cook came out? He's the head of Apple. He came out as openly gay. So I was talking to Tim, and I was thinking about how gay people have they've changed the world often, or they've influenced us. They've had tremendous influence in ways that, and we're familiar with their story. We don't really care about that element of their life. And I thought, hey, we should talk about influential people in history who were gay. It may not even, especially when in the culture we come from, this LDS Mormon culture, we so often would just like poo-poo and like, oh, it's like they did all this great, yeah, but they're gay. But it's like, but there's this problem, and we know that this has come down from us. We know from the Mormon leaks. Remember the Mormon leaked videos online? How concerned some leaders were about a guy named what's his name? Who's the WikiLeaks guy? The Australian guy? What's his first name? What's his name? You know who I'm talking about.
No.
I can't think of his name right now. Well, not only him, but the guy that gave him, the army guy that gave him a bunch of information from the military. Chelsea Manning. Okay. Chelsea Manning gave some stuff. Well, and of course, he's gay, right? He's gay. There's this worry about the gay agenda, right?
Julian Assange.
Okay.
Julian Assange.
There was this concern about this influence of gay people on the world. And it got me thinking, well, they've already tremendous influence, and we can talk about that this evening, about who in history, I mean, one example that comes to mind immediately, who was one of the founders of Word Perfect?
Oh.
You guys remember one of the founders of Word Perfect?
There he is.
Hey guys.
Hi.
Howdy.
Hi, Jared.
Somebody open
Hi.
up Wikipedia and look up Word Perfect.
Paul,
founders.
not Paul. One of the founders of Word Perfect. I just name slips me right now. Well, Word Perfect has. He's gay. He came out. I mean, he came out publicly. I don't know how long ago. He was on Mormon Stories, but he. Second.
Bruce Bastian.
Ashton or Alan Ashton.
Ashton, that's it. Alan Ashton, that's it. He sold what? Probably hundreds of millions of dollars of product, not only to the church but to BYU. You know, Word Perfect was the thing in Utah back in the 80s, right? They were right there with Microsoft.
Yeah.
This up and coming company until Microsoft beat them out. But that's a good example of somebody who's had tremendous impact on not only technology but influential in the Mormon community. We'll say there's many more we'll talk about. So anyway, I just thought it was an interesting discussion point. Famous or influential gay people in history. You can go back clear to the 1500s with they widely believe Leonardo da Vinci was gay. So anyway, I just thought that was an interesting thing that we could talk about and consider how much impact I'll share one last 30-second personal story. I became friends with a man about 18 months or so before my mission. He was quite a bit older than me, but he was very influential on me, in a very positive way. Me to play golf. We were best friends in the year before I left on my mission. During my mission, about 4 or 5 months in, he ended our friendship. He stopped all communication. He was told to. And I never understood what happened. I never understood why. He was a single man. He was in his 30s. I was 19, 20. And it wasn't until literally 20 years after I came home from my mission, I'd run into him once or twice. He was very uncomfortable, didn't want to talk to me. I never understood what happened until he called me out of the blue. I was in Utah. He was in California. He called me and he says, I have something I need to tell you. And he basically told me that he was gay, and that's why he ended our friendship. We were best friends. And I know,
But he was pressured.
Bad feelings. Well, he was told by his police leaders to end his relationship with me, to end communication with me. Yeah. And so it never occurred to me that he was gay, not a single time, until 5 seconds before he told me. He said, there's something I need to tell you. And when he said that, it hit me. I was like, he's going to tell me that he's gay. It was like this. I knew he was going to tell me. And I didn't feel any repulsion at all towards him. In fact, I felt empathy. And I felt bad that we had lost our friendship over this. Even this day, he won't communicate. He really won't communicate with me. I was in California recently. I said, hey, I'd like to get together. I sent him a letter in the mail with a stamp on it. I said, hey, I'd like to get together and just catch up. You know, we haven't talked for 30 years now, more than 30 years. And no contact. Somehow it's just too difficult for him. But I just thought about this whole thing and how people have influenced us, and we haven't even known or cared that they were gay. And these people have had tremendous influence on the church and the Mormon culture without us even knowing. And so I thought it was an interesting thing to think about, especially in light of how leaders have framed or tabled or addressed or dealt with gay people in the church.
He was
there's
nasty.
my spiel.
He was so gaslighted by the church leaders that he didn't feel he could continue his relationships. That really burns my butt.
Well, I suspect he was told directly by the bishop to stop communicating with me. But I didn't know that, and I don't have confirmation of that. But yeah, it's kind of sad. But we talk about, if you want, if it's appropriate, why don't we talk about who are some very influential gay people in history?
Well, I can
Maybe
tell
we
you.
don't even know. Yeah.
Let me tell you about one of them right now.
Yeah.
His name is Jared. He's on our panel. Jared was our guest last week with Gene and I on Saturday, I think it was. And he's got an incredibly interesting story about growing up in the church as a gay man. And we were so impressed by his story and how he expressed himself that we invited him to come be a guest tonight because I think he's going to be a great contributor. So welcome, Jared.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah, what a warm welcome. I appreciate that.
To your left, or maybe it's to your right, I don't know, the guy that looks like he could be Santa Claus.
Hey.
That's Tim Rathbone, as in Tuesdays with Tim. We're in his virtual living room, and you know Gene up in the corner.
Yeah.
And this is Brother Jones coming to you from Thailand.
Ooh, all right.
Now we have a few more members of the panel that'll be joining as we go. So while this is
Tim, also known as Ted Kaczynski.
So we interviewed Jared last week, and we aired his interview recently, and he had gone through conversion therapy, and he tells his story there. But Jared, is there any sort of historical thing that you want to talk about first? Is there any other thing to set up anything that you know about?
I mean,
or
I'm not real familiar with
you wanna
famous
talk more
gays because they're hard to know. They hide. They were hidden. I know that there was a man in my stake presidency when I was in California who came out to me privately as being gay, and he was very influential, and I loved his son, but it was a big secret, you know, and he was obviously married to a woman and not acting on it. But I just thought, how many other men in the church or just in history, just men in history have, I like that, that prompt about like who's people influence us and we don't even know that they're gay. That really got me thinking. I bumped into a man that he had just resigned as president of the temple committee who was gay, and he said that he was like, Jared, basically everyone on the committee of the church of building temples is gay. And I just was like, also like, what? So our beautiful temple architecture is provided to us through homosexuals right now? And he was like, yeah. I was like, well, that tracks.
That's
I have
really
seen
interesting.
one of the
Who's the guy, the person, Laura Lee Hall, is it?
Laura Lee Hall.
Laura Lee Hall.
Yeah.
she was the lead
That's an
designer.
interesting- Yeah.
Yeah, she was in charge
I
of the
was just going to
department.
say that there's probably art in the temples hanging that was painted by gay people, but we've actually got the temples painted by gay people. I find that so interesting how these people have been treated, and yet they are very influential. Just say that.
You know, I've always wondered why that is, but you know, I'm so familiar with my son's friends. It just seems like gay folks are more creative than the straight people that want to be creative. I know that Jared, for instance, you're in design, fashion design, or
Interior
home
design
design.
and art.
Yeah, yeah. My son is a creator as well. Um, and by the way, I just want to say that my son Garrett contacted me after the show that you did, Jared, and he was so impressed with the whole podcast, and he said that it was one of the best he'd seen. So kudos to you, Jared.
That's beautiful.
It's
And
very good. It was
yeah,
very good.
and gay people seem to be neater, cleaner. Um, I mean, am I right? Am I making this up?
No,
It's
I live in a gay community when I'm in Palm Springs, California, and I'll tell you that gays come in all shapes and sizes, and some of them the only difference between them and like your basic straight bro is that they like dudes. But there is something about the energy of like playfulness and creativity and boldness that seems to go hand in hand with being gay, but it puts a pressure on some gay men because they're like, I didn't get the gay gene. That's a common thing that I've heard. I didn't get the gay gene because I'm just a guy.
well, speaking of shapes and sizes, I didn't wear a shirt today, so you could get an idea of what my build is.
Ooh, well done.
Randy.
That wasn't for
Wonder where you got
the
your,
gay show. That was
your
just
six pack,
that was my
your
picture
eight
shirts
pack.
today.
Come on, Tim, show us your one pack.
Yeah, I've got a keg.
Okay, I'll check my one.
In doing my research today, I researched some of the historical figures that you're referring to, Brother Jones, and one of the ones that jumped out the most at me, and I think probably because I watched the movie about him, was Harvey Milk and what he contributed to the gay culture in our nation, to the point where he set up so many organizations, and his life was to help gays overcome the stigma that had fallen upon them. And sadly, he was assassinated, which is another disgusting point about our history in the LGBTQ community. But he really contributed a lot, and he died when, let's see, he died the year I graduated from high school, which was 1977, I think it was, or 78.
It says 78. That's right, 78.
Yeah, he was the city.
I'd never heard of this person until I heard the movie. I don't even know that I've seen the movie. But anyway.
It's really good.
It's a really good movie. Yeah.
Well, since we're on that genre, Bohemian Rhapsody, the lead singer of Queen.
Yeah,
Freddie
You know,
Mercury.
that, I think that
Freddie Mercury.
yeah, Freddie Mercury. That came into. I don't know if you haven't seen that movie. I really enjoyed the movie. Very inspiring, actually. And of course, it depicts that issue in the movie. Like, sure, you know, at that time, I'm not sure what year he died, but I mean, everybody knows Bohemian Rhapsody. That's a classic.
I was living in Paris when he died, so that would have been about 92, I think, 92 or 93. And you
Randy,
know,
you lived in Paris. When did you
Yeah.
live in Paris?
I had a counter-terrorist squad for the Walt Disney Company. I headed up the counter-terrorist squad as they opened the Euro Disney Company. What's that?
We
Yeah.
will have to talk more later. I didn't know that you lived in Paris.
Yes. Oh, I love Paris.
I would definitely like to talk about that.
You look at Freddie Mercury. You look at well, even going back further was Liberace, who was one of the creative and flamboyant men ever. But you know, he lived a good life, and and people accepted him. I don't think that he really got too much flack for it.
No.
Speaking of musicians, that's yeah. Well, I think I've mentioned this before on one of these Tuesdays with Tim's. I've been a intermittent participant, but my naivete level was so high in my teens that I didn't really believe gay was a real thing. I did not believe it was like a real thing. I thought it was all just like a mental or like a choice. I did, that's how naive I was. But how many Elton John songs have been played at church dances over the years?
Right?
He was gay. Right?
Yeah.
I think the entertainment industry, once again, it's that creative and that talent. I know at Walt Disney World, we had close to 30,000 employees, and it was about 78 to 80% gay.
Wow.
Just because of their talent and their abilities.
You're talking about performance or just insight overall?
Performance was 93%.
Wow.
The street performers and the show people for Disney, but just overall. And I know my son Andrew is a flight attendant, and that requires a great deal of being friendly and patience. And I know most of the guys that he flies with are gay. So there's just certain fields that they really excel in. And yeah, I'm just babbling at this point. So
yeah, Tim, do you want to tell us about Tchaikovsky?
Well,
Or
Tchaikovsky?
other classical musicians that I'm not immediately aware of?
That's because Tim grew up with Tchaikovsky.
John Baptiste Lully, George Frederick Handel, and
is that right?
I was blown away when I found that out. Yes,
I would like to find out more about that.
Me
Handel,
too.
I mean, as a classical musician myself, I mean, you can't get any better than Handel. I don't know about Bach, but actually Bach had been
Bach had 13 or 14 children.
I was just going to say that, that doesn't always mean he wasn't gay, but I did not know Handel. So you're saying that that's considered settled.
I found that out a few weeks ago, I think. A few months ago, maybe. Blew me away. Some guy, Arcano Corelli, Franz Schubert, Chopin, Camille Saint-Saëns, Tchaikovsky, Siegfried Wagner.
Wagner, really?
No, his son, Siegfried.
Okay.
Not Richard, but his son. Ethel Smith, Charles Thompson Griffiths, Benjamin Britten, Samuel Barber, Giancarlo Minetti, Aaron Copeland, Leonard Bernstein. He was bi. He was married, but he had relations with men. John Cage, Michael Tippett, Francis Polnick, Wendy Carlos, who was Walter Carlos, who did a lot of stuff with the Moog synthesizer. Transgender, Lou Harrison, Julius Eastman, John Corigliano, Nicole Mollet, and Jennifer Higdon. So those are all very prominent composers in the classical music world. And then we've got them in.
And probably Schroeder from Peanuts.
Ha ha.
And Gomer Pyle. Let's not forget that.
Gomer Pyle.
Yeah. What's his real name? Jim Neighbors.
Jim Neighbors.
Well, while we're back in the old, Renaissance, Leonardo da Vinci. I say he
Da Vinci
is suspected to be gay based on historical records and personal writings. I mean, he's a household name, Da Vinci, and it never occurs to us. So anyway, I find this really interesting.
Well, Alan Turing for computers, the Turing test.
Yeah, that's what's the name of the movie that came out a few years ago about breaking the Enigma machine?
Oh,
I forget the name of it. I'm trying to think if they get into that part of the story.
they do.
But,
They get into that part of the story.
Yeah, I mean, you can't. I mean, if you want to talk
Imitation
about the modern
game.
age, imitation
Thank you.
that's got to be. I mean, it's like he's influenced. It's like 98% of humanity is
Exactly.
are using technology that originated from this guy's mind. If that's a way to frame it properly.
Yeah. George Washington Carver.
Sure, I don't know Walt Whitman very well.
Walt Whitman was, yeah.
But yeah, he was, and I think Walt Whitman became familiar to our generation via the Breaking Bad TV. That's how I became aware of it.
Didn't Brigham Young have a son that was gay?
Yes. Yes. One of his sons was gay.
And by a certain leader's knowledge, that's impossible.
Right. Right. Oh, there's so many.
Well, you better chime in here, Gene.
Barbara Jordan,
Jared.
politician
Barbara Jordan.
from Houston. She was a black politician from Houston.
I even looked up.
Frida Kahlo, Frida the movie
What?
artist.
Oh yeah. Kahlo. That's right. I've got that one here as well. Died in 1954.
Josephine Baker, famous actress. When Tim was a kid.
Rock Hudson.
Yeah.
And Montgomery Cliff.
Speaking of
Cesar
Montgomery,
Romero.
Elizabeth Montgomery, Bewitched, both of her husbands in the show were gay, both Darrens.
Oh,
Yeah.
Look at Siegfried and Roy, the
Yeah.
magicians
With the lions, tigers.
and bears. Oh my.
Maven says David Archuleta. It's going to get more famous and more famous.
Well, okay. We got Mike Quinn. We got Ron Prittis and Gary Bergera of Signature Books. Who else is there?
Google's telling me that Alexander the Great was gay. I don't know if we can trust that, but I just did a quick Google.
Yeah, I think we can trust that. I think he was bi, probably more bi than gay.
He called himself Alexander the Fabulous.
Yeah.
But they changed it to great in the Greek.
Right.
Right.
I've got a mile long of current entertainers, but I'm letting y'all do the oldies and the older, back in the day, gay.
Back in the day.
What you guys are doing? I'm just saying I don't want to climb into the Neil Patrick Harris and on and on and on and on and on.
Wouldn't it be
Jump in,
interesting to know of the founding fathers. You know, when we say founding fathers, really we're talking about 50 people, I believe.
Right.
Cary Grant was by Anthony Perkins.
Oh, Anthony Perkins. Ah, interesting.
Achilles, says MB.
It's giving me new ones. I want older. One of the ones from the silent era. Like Valentino or something like that.
Madge was gay? The Palmolive lady? I'll be darned. I'm reading the comments. I'm sorry.
Sure.
That's okay. Amby Davis. Okay, who else?
Google saying Shakespeare.
Tab
James
Hunter,
the First.
Raymond Burr.
Raymond Burr, huh? Well, there's
Yeah.
Megan.
Hi, friends.
Hi, Megan.
I've been
How are
Hi,
waiting.
lovely.
I've been waiting for you so I can show you my body for this particular episode.
I saw it earlier when I was driving. I
Oh,
almost
you did?
went off the
I
road.
almost left the road.
I've been working out a little bit, and I just wanted to,
You look
brag
great.
a little bit.
You
Thank
look
you.
great. I love it. I was really excited when you guys started talking about classical musicians because I think the very first time that I encountered anyone in the public eye who was acceptable to talk about was Chopin. I was raised learning classical piano, and one of the pieces that I started learning when I was about 12 years old was the Raindrop Prelude. And I always loved the stories behind the songs that I learned. And my piano teacher told me this story about Chopin and his great love, George Sand, who was a woman who went by the pseudonym George Sand. And she dressed very masculine, and she was pretty much non-binary. But she was an author, and she could not get published as a woman, and so she went by the pseudonym of George Sand. And the Raindrop Prelude was written by Chopin, and it was written really as a tribute to George Sand. And the beginning of the piece starts out very gentle and lovely. You hear these recurring theme of the single note repeating over and over. And then the middle of the piece is very stormy and very dark. And then in the last section of the piece, it returns to that sort of gentle, lovely lilt. And the story went that Chopin wrote this, and he began writing it in the morning when he was in his home with George Sand. They were enjoying coffee together in the morning. And then she went away to go and talk to someone about one of her publications. And that's when he wrote the middle section. And then when she returned to the house is when he wrote the third section, which returned to that lovely lilting melody. And it was a tribute to George Sand that when she was away, everything was dark and stormy in his life. But when she returned, it came back to that peaceful melody. And I always absolutely loved the imagery of that piece. And also, as a 12-year-old girl who was bisexual and not willing to admit to myself that I was bisexual, to hear that kind of a story coming from an artist who was just deeply loved and renowned in the piano community, it was just so enlightening and wonderful to me to hear that there was a love story that was honored that didn't fit the traditional mode.
Megan, in the corner is Jared, who was our guest last week.
Hi, Jared.
Hi.
Who was raised in the church as a gay man, and we interviewed him about some of the trials and tribulations he had, and so I just wanted to make sure you guys. This is Megan Connor, not any Megan Connor, The Megan
The
Connor.
Megan Cotter.
Yes.
Well, I'm so happy to connect with you. And Jared, I would love to have you come on my podcast, which is called The Midlife Revolution. It's all about making small changes that become revolutionary. I'd love to have you on and talk with you about your experiences. Yeah,
I would love that.
I saw the episode. I thought it was totally fabulous, and I loved it. I'd love to have you come and tell your story on my podcast as well, if you'd like.
I'd love that. Yeah, let's set it up.
Yeah, I'd love
I'll
that.
connect you.
Thanks.
Gene is the great Lego piece, the great connector.
The great connector.
He's been connected by Randy Watts, the prototype of Gene Judson.
That's right. Gene 2.0 is Randy.
And can I just share with you guys that today is my anniversary. When I got divorced, I started celebrating my anniversary the day that I got married. It would have been 30 years today that I was married. And I ended my marriage after 22 years. And that whole time that I was married, I was completely unable to even admit to myself that I was bisexual. But something deeply broke in me the day that the 2015 exclusion policy was announced. And it was the beginning of the end of my relationship with the LDS Church. And so all of this kind of has sort of a culminatory feeling for me tonight.
Well, you're in our hearts.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I think this is the anniversary of my excommunication.
Oh, wow.
It's either today or yesterday. It was Mother's Day, 2001.
— 24 years ago.
Yeah.
Were you
Well,
sad?
congratulations to you, Tim, and also condolences. That's
No,
bittersweet.
was I sad? No, I was happy. I literally jumped about 2 or 3 feet off the ground. Well, yeah. Walking out of the building, I literally jumped up off the ground. Yeah.
I thought you were going to say you jumped out of the building.
It was either the 11th or the 12th.
Close enough.
Yeah.
Well, my anniversary was the 13th because my former spouse, his birthday was April 13th, and he didn't want to ever forget our anniversary. And so he chose May 13th as our wedding date so that he would remember it.
My anniversary was May 1st from my first wife. May Day, if you will, because that's how I think.
Mayday.
So, yeah. May Day.
I've been doing a little research the last 3 minutes. That's the world we live in. I just looked up on the Encyclopedia of Mormonism, which was published in 1992. They have an article written by a guy named Victor L. Brown Jr. It's not a very long one, titled Homosexuality. Guess who the two primary cited authors are, or like references are for this article? Guess who they refer to? This will make you laugh. So
It's not Joseph Fielding Smith, is it?
No. In the bibliography, again, this is 1992. See how far we've come.
Okay.
This is more than 30 years ago.
Yeah.
This is like the definitive. This is like Encyclopedia of Mormonism is the Mormon doctrine of the 1990s, right? That was the compendium or whatever. So the two references in the bibliography refer to articles and interviews by Dallin Oaks and Boyd K. Packer.
There you go.
There you go.
2 words. Whatever.
If there was
Right.
ever a general authority had an unfortunately unapt name, it was Boyd K. Packer.
Yes, I agree.
His nickname was not Fudge.
I knew you were getting there.
Sorry,
T.
I've been waiting 20 years to tell that joke.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, since we're on this topic, I mean, it kind of relates. I think it would be a very interesting. Maybe we set this up. We all go pick an article from the Encyclopedia of Mormonism, hear it, what it teaches in 1992, or what it tells the world about Mormonism, to what is being to us today, 34, 33 years later. There would be a lot of differences.
For sure. And when I ended up pregnant and unwed at the age of 19 in 1993, 1994, that was when I read The Miracle of Forgiveness for the first time. And at my mother's behest, she said, you need to go talk to the bishop. And luckily, my bishop was a very kind, understanding, generous man. I went and confessed to the bishop, and it was a coercive control situation, but I didn't know that at the time. And so I blamed it all on myself. And he was such a kind and gracious man. He said, you've done a really difficult thing tonight. And he handed me a $5 bill and said, go buy yourself an ice cream.
Wow.
And it might sound kind of creepy to some people, but to me, honestly, like that was such a healing thing. For him to say to me, man, you just, this was hard for you. Go and treat yourself. And it was totally the opposite experience of everything that I got at home. I was so grateful for it. But then, there was the caveat of, read The Miracle of Forgiveness. And I almost didn't live through that. Honestly, it was such a terrible, horrible book.
I had a similar experience. In 96, I went to my bishop seeking help before my mission to stop my masturbating and confess I was gay, and I read that book. And it just shut me down so intensely that I had no sex drive for a few years, but the damage was long lasting and had to be unpacked for many, many years after that.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm so sad for anyone who read that book and internalized it as, this is a prophet of God speaking to us, because the messaging was so harmful. And I think I said this, some time ago, it should have been called There's No Hope for Forgiveness, because that's how I felt after I read that book. I really felt like it was hopeless. I felt like I couldn't be who I genuinely was and also be acceptable in the culture and in my family. And that book was really, really incredibly harmful. From what I understand, though, it's been taken out of publication. Is that correct? Can anyone else confirm that?
I've
I heard the same thing. They're like trying to erase it.
I believe
It's an embarrassment.
I believe it's been taken out of Deseret.
Yeah, but not that they've recanted any of the teachings in it or said we're sorry for the harmful rhetoric that was printed. They're just saying, well, we're embarrassed about it, but they won't say specifically why.
I got assigned to read that book by my bishop when I was a senior in high school, because I was on a date and this girl was I don't know, we just hit it off and I felt her boobs and yep, we did some heavy petting and he told me that I needed to read The Miracle of Forgiveness. I'm thinking if I had to do that, I should have done more than feel her boobs.
That's not heavy. That's not heavy. Heavy petting is below the waist.
I didn't even get there.
There's apparently there is no heavy petting above the waist. And if anybody
That's right.
I think I asked as many times as nicely as I could of my young women's leaders back in the day of, can you please describe to me what heavy petting is? Because I don't get it. I'm like, I pet my dog. I don't understand. Is it that the petting is too hard? I just didn't get it. And then we had this young women's lesson where my young women's leader said, okay, I want you girls to name everything that you would do with a boy, all the way from holding hands all the way down to having sex. And it was an incredibly uncomfortable lesson with people naming things, that fell on that spectrum of all the bases, right?
And somebody
And
had to
then
place them in the right order.
Yeah, you had to place them in the right order because there was hand holding, and then there was kissing, and then there was kissing sitting down, and then there was kissing laying down, and then just keeping going down the thing.
Kissing in the back seat.
And she wrote these all on the chalkboard in the Sunday school room, and I was like, oh, I hope nobody comes in and sees our list that we've made.
How to receive revelation. That's what I would have said.
And so she said, okay, I'm going to put the chalk at the top up here with holding hands. And I want you to tell me to stop when it's gone too far. And so she started to draw the line with the hand holding. And then she just went as fast as she possibly can right down the chalkboard, and nobody could stop her in time. And she was like, see, that's the point. That you're going to go too far before you can even stop yourselves, and you're never going to know where the line is. And we were like, oh no, how do we stop ourselves? It was like this cautionary tale. And I remember her saying to us in that lesson that if we ended up getting pregnant, that would be the best thing that could happen to us, because the worst thing would be that we could get an STD, or we could end up, in an abortion situation or something like that. So I just remember what stuck with me the most was that I can never stop myself. If I start, I will never be able to stop. So I should never hold hands with anybody. And the second part was that that getting pregnant would be a blessing, because that would be the best thing that could happen to me.
Well, on that chalkboard, I wonder where on the list was bestiality and necrophilia.
Yeah, that was not something I knew about at that age, thank goodness, but did obviously learn about in reading The Miracle of Forgiveness, because as you all know, masturbation equals gay, gay equals bestiality. That's how that goes.
I'm as gay as can be then. I mean,
aren't we all?
Right?
And as Jared mentioned, that it's a slippery slope. It makes you feel like you could be a murderer or something even worse.
Yes.
Just because
absolutely.
You are thinking or going in that direction.
Yep.
Crazy.
We had this lovely account of Spencer W. Kimball bathing someone in neck and cheek kisses. Who was that? Can you guys help me out with this? It was a book that one of the other 12 apostles wrote, where he said that he loved Spencer Kimball. Spencer Kimball and him were very, very close. And then there was a situation where they were leaving and they were going away for a long time, and Spencer Kimball bathed his neck and chin and cheek in kisses. And it was a very, very intimate thing. And it's like, it was widely publicized probably about 4 or 5 years ago when it came out. And I can't remember who it was. My apologies.
When we're talking about these,
Michael Quinn.
We're talking about
Mike. It was Mike.
Talking about these famous gays in history, and then we see that gay equals pervert and pervert equals criminal. And so, like these, nobody could win, or you had to keep it such a secret because you would be demonized. And that's definitely what I experienced, feeling. I just thought, well, if you masturbate, you're like Jeffrey Dahmer, or if you're attracted, if boys are interested in boys, then you're a pervert, which makes you Jeffrey. I mean, I always went back to Jeffrey Dahmer for me. And
and please go ahead.
Well, it just gives me so much compassion. I mean, and I was I was raised through the 80s and 90s, and now we're talking about some of these guys that were raised before, or I associate with a bunch of men that are in their 70s and 80s in Palm Springs, California. And it's just the horrificness of the torture of that who you are. So it doesn't matter your contribution. Alan Turing, who cracked the code and did this amazing contribution, was demonized immediately because of this misconception. So it's horrific, really.
It's very horrific.
It really is.
One of the things that bothered me so much about my son Garrett, when we were still going to church, is that he told me that he knows of 4 other guys in our ward that were gay, but they wouldn't come out, and they were part of the group that would tease Garrett. And I don't know, that just really burned me, the hypocrisy in it, when, it seems like the people that scream the loudest are gay themselves.
Well, there's rumors that Kimball and Packer were both lean that way.
We've seen it happen over and over and over again. And I can't remember which news outlet it was that reported that the use of Pornhub for gay porn went up something like 60% when the Republican National Convention was in town.
Yeah.
And it's, all of these people who are demonizing gay people, but then it's because, and Carl Jung said this the very best, where he said everything that irritates us about other people are the things that we hate about ourselves. And so all of these politicians who are so adamant about demonizing gay people, many of them turn out to be on the spectrum themselves. And I think you really hit on it, Jared, when you were talking about, it doesn't really matter what your other contribution to society is. If you are not faithful and fully acceptable in the Mormon culture, it really doesn't matter what else you've done in your life. It all gets thrown under the bus of not being righteous. And, I've certainly have experienced a lot of that in my own life and my family, that because I've left the church, it doesn't really matter what else I say. None of it is valid in any way.
When we look at these contributions that gay people have made over history, I mean, we really see that when we make space for gay, we really make space for everybody.
That's
when we make space for, I mean, and I just love this movement of there's so many young people that they're not going to claim a gender, and they're not going to claim a sexuality, and don't put me in a box. It's none of your business. And when we make space for them, we make space for everyone to be just who they want to be and give the contribution that they're best suited to give. So it's pretty, even though I don't always understand it, it's very exciting to watch more space being carved out for people to be who they want to be, so they can give a contribution without fear of retribution.
Right.
Wasn't it FBI Director Hoover was sort of anti-gay, but he was a closeted gay man as well?
He used to cross-dress.
So on the spectrum.
Yes. On the spectrum. Yeah.
I always got a kick out of the episode of Seinfeld where they were talking about this subject, and every time they'd say something about he was gay, they'd follow it up with, not that there's anything wrong with that.
Right.
It was a classic episode. But every time they'd say it, they'd be, but not that there's anything wrong with that, just to make sure that people weren't offended by them,
saying that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's sad that they even have to say that.
Right.
Yeah. One of the reasons why the 2015 policy bothered me so much was because at the time I was a choir teacher, and I had so many students who were LGBTQ, and my bishop at one point invited me to hey, bring your choir students to come and sing at church. And at the time I thought, what a fabulous experience, not only for my students but for the ward to see this huge diversity of people making gorgeous, beautiful music. And so I would bring my choir students to church for the Christmas and the Easter programs. And after the 2015 policy, I couldn't do it anymore because I thought, how can I bring these kids, many of whom are LGBTQ, how can I bring them to a church where I know that they are marginalized and demonized and not accepted? And how can I belong to an organization and have my students still believe that I love and care about them? And so I stopped bringing them to sacrament meeting because I didn't want to bring them to a place where I knew that there were policies that were harmful to them. And I will say, of all of the accomplishments that I had as a choir teacher, and, we won contests and we had awards and accolades and everything. When I left teaching during the pandemic, I had a lot of students who were heartbroken, and I was too. It was really hard to leave. But it was also kind of hard to sing during the pandemic. So it wasn't a lot of fun. But one of my students contacted me the following year after she graduated, and she was openly gay. And she sent me a link to something that was called Queering the Map. And I don't know if you've heard of this before, but it's where you can go to a map in your city and people will have marked out places that are safe spaces for the LGBTQ community. And, whether it's a club or a library or anything, whatever, she sent me the link that pointed to the choir room at the high school that I used to teach at. And the post on Queering the Map said, say whatever you want to say about Clark High School, but named me and said she was a legend for the gays.
Wow.
And of all of the things that I accomplished during my time as a teacher, I think I'm more proud of that than anything else, that my classroom was a safe space and they knew it was a safe space. And it didn't matter whatever the other policies of the district were, whatever, that room was the place where you could be who you were, you could be loved and accepted for who you were. And I was more proud of that than anything else I ever did in my teaching career.
That's our Megan.
Wow. Wow.
And you know what? This reminds me that in the 90s and the 2000s, early 2000s, when people would leave the church, they had nowhere to go, right? And most of it was because of history, right? The church had lied to them about history. And John DeLynn starts his podcast, and it's all about people talking their story about how they left the church because the church lied to them about history. There were some LGBTQ issues as well. Gays were leaving because it wasn't a safe place for them. And now the tide has turned. It's the social issues of the church's awful stance on the LGBTQ community that is causing more people to think the church isn't true, we'll say.
I'm glad that people are waking up. I'm disgusted that, because I just in my mind picture, what would Christ do? How would he handle it? What did he do? He hung out with the people who didn't feel accepted, who didn't feel that they were part of the important crowd. He hung out with them and let them know that they were. And
inclusivity.
Yeah, exactly. Inclusivity. And the fact that the church does the opposite of that. I recently came out on my Facebook page as being someone who's left the church. And, it was a pretty long post that I made. And I was overwhelmed by the love that I received from most of my member and non-member friends. There was just like 3 people who were pompous a-holes, saying, you couldn't handle it. So this one, he always would come down on me when I'd put pictures of me with my sons at Pride And I'd say anything about my sons, and he'd bring up the fact that, well, they're gay, and what are you doing posting about this? And I just about had it. And so this last round, he mentioned my sons again. And so I put the episode of Jared and Gene and I last night at this morning about 1 a.m. I put it on his Facebook page. And I said, because of the conversations that we've had, I thought you might appreciate this episode. Please watch it. And I got up at about 8 o'clock in the morning, and not only was it gone, he had unfriended me. And I just did a little dance of celebration because that's fine.
You don't need people like that in your life.
Well, I seriously suspect that he's one of these that might be a closeted gay, because he's so loud about bitching about it, you know? So F him very much. I just don't care. I get so fed up with people who will not recognize the importance of every single person, no matter what their sexual preference is. That's how they were made. They're children of God. If that's what these folks believe, then they need to believe that everyone's a child of God, not just the ones that they think qualify for their club. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely.
I'm so glad to be out of the club.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why the 2015 exclusion policy led me out, because I came to the conclusion that I believed the church got it wrong about Black people in the priesthood. And I believe they're getting it wrong about the LGBTQ community, but I didn't want to wait 150 years for them to figure it out. I didn't want to be on the wrong side of saying, okay, I'm just going to stick with the brethren because they're just fallible men and they're going to be influenced by their own biases. No, if we had an actual prophet of God, if we had someone who actually did speak to God, do you not think that God would tell him, I love all of my children. I made them this way. This is how they are. You should love and accept them exactly how they are. And we should not deny them any of the blessings that any of the other faithful members get. And the biggest problem that I have is that there are certain sections and segments of the church where gay people are more accepted than in other places. And, you know, from the pulpit, they say, we love and accept everyone. On the outside of the building, it says visitors welcome, but they show us with their policies, and they show us with their words, and they show us with their actions. Trans people are not welcome in LDS churches. They're not welcome. The policies show us that they're not welcome. And if we really had a prophet who spoke to God, God would tell the prophet not to exclude his children for the way that he made them. And that, to me, is the bottom line.
There's that story about the man who's trapped in a flood, and like he prays to God to save him, and like a canoe comes by and a boat comes by, and he's like, no, God's going to save me. I had this vision that all over the world there's intense suffering, and every day people are praying with their words or with their energy, send us more peace, send us more joy, send us more whatever. And then all over the world people are popping up: gay, lesbian, trans, bi, queer, queer of all sorts. And they're like, what's wrong with our planet? Everything's fun. And it's like, God's like, you prayed for peace, you prayed for joy, you prayed for inclusion, these people will bring it. And recently I was at a queer country dance event in Seattle, and there was hundreds of at least half these people were under 30 and the other half were over 30. And it was like, these people are thinking so differently. Like, even I was surprised at how people think so differently, who, like I said, they don't want to claim a gender, or they're trans, or they're just so creative, even in their bodies. And I thought, they're bringing the answers of how to think differently, because we can't solve the problems from the same thought level that got us into the problems. So it's really lovely, but it's frustrating to those of us who can see the beauty of difference and the beauty of queer and the beauty of weirdo. I mean, so many weirdos are coming to this world, and they're God's answer to what we're asking for.
I absolutely love that. And I remember having this idea and this philosophy as a younger person that, if you pray to God for patience, he's going to give you opportunities to practice patience. And it's just exactly what you're saying, is that if we want more peace and we want more unity and we want more love and we want more acceptance, well, then if you believe in God, then he's giving us all of these opportunities to practice all of these ideas because of the differences in humanity and because of all of the different ideas on the spectrum of how to live your life. There's not one ideal. There is a variety of ideals, and there's a variety of ways to be happy. There's a variety of ways to choose to live your life. And if we will learn to understand all of those varieties of ways, then we will be able to be more peaceful, not only with our fellow human beings, but with ourselves as well, because there are so many different parts of us as human beings. And I've studied so much Jungian psychology, but also I love the idea of internal family systems that Dr. Richard Schwartz talks about, that we all have different parts of ourselves. And what I like to say is that when the 2015 exclusion policy came out, it was like the parts of me all sit around this round table, and they're directed by my highest self. And there's the warrior part, and there's the truth teller part, and there's also the abandoned child, and there's also the petty part, and there's also the bisexual part of me. And in 2015, when that policy came out, the bisexual part of me stood up at the table and demanded to be heard.
Nice.
And the unfortunate and sad thing is that I saw her and I recognized her, and I said, I want to allow you to speak, but I'm not ready for that. I can't allow it to happen, because I still wasn't acceptable in my family system, and I still wasn't acceptable in my religion. And so I just said to her at that time, I see you, I love you, but I can't let you talk yet. And I think something broke in me that day. That bisexual part of me had to sit down without speaking. And that ended any idea of me ever being acceptable in Mormonism. And it was the beginning of the end for me. So she had to sit down that day without speaking, but she's not silent now.
I'm glad for that. This was a cool experience. I took my son, Garrett. I think my other son, gay son, was on his mission at the time. He hadn't come out yet. And I took him to the gay rodeo in Chandler, Arizona. They have a huge gay rodeo. And it was so cool because, everyone has a stereotype in their head about what does a gay person look like. You go to the gay rodeo and there's these big, tough cowboys, covered in manure and dust. And they're with another tough cowboy and they're walking up the bleachers holding hands, and they've got their arms around each other and they're kissing. And it was one of the most beautiful sights I've ever seen, because I wanted my son Garrett to see that, there's no stereotype. These guys probably wouldn't do that outside of the gay rodeo, but at least that was the safe place, like you were talking about, Megan. That was a place where they felt safe to be their own selves. I pray, I hope that people can continue to be able to be safe everywhere they walk in this nation, in this world. But still, there's areas where, they're not, they're still behind the times in so many areas of our country that, it's strange for them to see someone gay, and it shouldn't be. But
yeah. And you were talking about Harvey Milk earlier, and I was thinking about all of the people, who were willing to live openly an authentic life and literally risk their lives, and some gave their lives for the right to live openly and be authentic as they are. And I think there are still a lot of people who get sacrificed and not necessarily killed, but they lose their families, they lose their jobs, they lose their communities because they're willing to be authentic. And so I just want to continue to applaud those people who are willing to be authentic and to live authentically as they are, and to be an advocate for authentic living and to not hide, because there are still risks. There are still incredibly harmful, difficult, horrible risks and losses for anybody who chooses to live openly. And I just applaud anybody who is courageous enough to do that.
Amen.
Amen. See, back in 2000, we had Prop 22, which was the Defense of Marriage Act. And they handed out at church, yes on 22, yard signs. And the Sunday before the election, I printed out no on 22 signs. And I went around every LDS chapel in the Victor Valley and put it on the doors.
Nice.
And I didn't know this, but they had state conference in Victorville that Sunday.
Tim, what year was that?
That was 2000. That was 2000.
Oh, 2000. Okay.
November 2000. And they were looking to trying to find out who did it. So that was my rebellion back then. Because I didn't agree with it. I just didn't like it. And there were a lot of people in my ward. There were 3 or 4 of us that fought against it too. One friends had a yes and a no in their yard. They said, make a choice. Both of the signs were there. But I refused to put the sign in my yard. And they kept on asking me, why isn't the sign in your yard? I says, I don't know. What I didn't know is it came while I was gone, and my son had hid it, put it somewhere in the backyard. And I says, I don't think I got one. And then Daniel says, yeah, Dad, you got one. And he brought it, and I ripped it up and threw it away.
I love it. I just also want to make sure that we point out, just for anybody who is watching who doesn't realize, that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints absolutely did financially support Prop 8 in California, and we need to make sure that we don't forget that.
And 22. I'm sure they supported 22 because we had a meeting right before the election, a few days before, asking for money and stuff. I remember right. So they did it back in 2000.
They financially supported it, didn't they, Megan?
Yes, they did. And they financially supported Prop 8. You can bet 100% that came from tithing dollars. And what they wanted to pass it off was they were trying to convince everybody in the church that if they let Prop 8 pass, that they were going to be forced to perform gay marriages in the temple. And that was absolutely not true. They completely lied about that. So not only did they financially support Prop 8 with a lot of tithing dollars, but they also lied about what Prop 8 was and what it was going to mean for the church if it passed.
If you could do it over again, Tim, the stuff that the stickers they put on your car if you park on the side of the road that you can't peel off.
Yeah.
That would be great to put on the church glass doors.
Well, that's what I did. They couldn't peel it off. They were stickers.
They were.
The backing. Oh yeah, they were stickers. I put it on all the windows in the bill. I printed like 20 of them. There was only one chapel I couldn't get to, but I put it on all the doors, all 4 doors or 5 of the building. I walked around.
Winning.
Put it.
It makes me think of that song.
Go
ahead, Brother Jones. No, please, Brother Jones, go ahead.
I was just going to say we probably should not forget that Prop 8 did pass, right? It took the Supreme Court to change it.
Thank heavens they did.
Yeah. Because when I went to church, there was still some residue of one on the window.
It just makes me think of that primary song. Whenever I come to the chapel doors. Shh, be still.
Hi, Kendall.
Hello,
Yeah, I
Mr.
had fun
Dave.
I had fun that night because I was so pissed that they were. I mean, and we had a joint adult meeting and they talked about it, and I was so pissed that they were asking for money and stuff, people to volunteer, and me and these other the other liberals in the ward, we all got together. Well, this is what we're going to do. And what I did, I never told anybody for years that I did that.
Well, I'm glad you came clean, Tim.
Oh,
Yeah, thanks for confessing.
yeah. You're welcome.
We hear your confession and we absolve you.
But you do have to read the Miracle of Forgiveness now. So,
After I was X'd, I read it, and I told them what I thought about it. I told them how horrible it was and how awful a book it was. I said, I don't believe in this anymore, and I don't care. But you asked me to read it, and I read it. I told the stake president, I read it, and it's a piece of shit. Is what I told him. He didn't like that at all.
Kendall's joined us. You have any comments of influential gay people in history or your life?
How you doing, Kendall?
Kendall?
Kendall's muted. You're muted, Kendall.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
By the way, I saw you on Mormonism After Dark. Good job.
Yeah, good job.
Yeah, I have a lot more to say on that subject, actually, about if the apostles know what they're doing and if they're culpable and stuff. Very interesting question.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the history of LGBTQ community.
Yeah, that's an interesting one.
Yeah.
I was one of those that was brainwashed by the church and like did a bunch of stuff for Proposition 8. So that's a dark time of my past.
I think there were
I'm
a lot of
sorry
people.
for what I said when I was Mormon.
Yep.
What were
and even now, like, to be totally vulnerable, at the back of my mind, because they gave me all these like studies and ideas, and it's like, what if I'm wrong? Like, what if this does impact children or is worse for society long term or whatever? Like, I have no rational reason to believe it, but it's still like embedded in my psyche. It's so bad.
It is so hard to deconstruct from those ideas that get instilled in us by people that we believe and love and trust. And I think, honestly, that it's conversations like this with people that we believe and love and trust that help us best to deconstruct from those harmful ideas. And I think I remember, Brother Jones, you were talking earlier about, was it you who was talking about your child coming out to you, and you kind of had this premonition that you knew?
No, it was a friend, a very influential friend, about 18 months before my mission, who ended our relationship, our friendship, and I had no idea why until about 20 years later.
Gene, you want to show us your shirt again? There you go.
Well, I had
first ex-Mormon merch.
I had two of my sons come out to me at different times. One of them was very young when they came out, and as LGBTQ. And I have to say, throughout my journey of healing and therapy, the thing that has helped me the most to be kinder to myself and to other people, one of my therapists asked me, well, what would you tell one of your children if they were in this same situation? And that does it for me. Like, so easy for me to come up with the best, most loving thing that I would tell my kids if they were in this situation. So I always try to get people to think about, what would it be like for you if one of your children was gay, one of your children was trans, one of your children was bisexual? What would you tell them? How would you react? Is it more important to you to have a relationship with that child, or is it more important for you to hang on to the dogma of what you've been taught your whole life. Because for a lot of people, that's really what does it for them, is that, man, if it was their kid, they wouldn't want to shun or exclude their kid. Now, there's also plenty of people who do shun and exclude their children. But for people who are truly compassionate, it's one way to help people sort of learn to break out of the dogma of what they've been handed their whole lives, is to think about, what would you want your child's life to look like, and how would you treat your child if you knew that what they were facing was a world that didn't accept them or love them for exactly who they are, and a world that was telling them that they could not have the types of life and relationships that you enjoy, where you get to love who you want, you get to marry who you want without shame.
That's right. Would you shun your kid if he was Jesus and he was talking about how the dogma that you grew up in was not really the right way?
Yeah.
It's a whole different ball game when they end up having a child who's gay.
Well, look at Oakes won't even talk to his grandson because he's gay. That's
Yeah.
so disgusting that he won't acknowledge him or talk to him.
Doesn't that go against
So-
everything we're taught as a gospel?
Of course it does.
Well, it goes against everything that Jesus taught, but it doesn't go against what we're taught in the policies of the church, because the policies
Right.
of the church dictate how we're supposed to treat the LGBTQ community. And so
Exactly.
that's where we want to run into trouble, because some people who are compassionate and kind are going to go with how, what would Jesus do? And other people are going to go with, what would Oakes do?
Then there's
Exactly.
And the way they set up the question is, if you have compassion for the person, like, you are in essence going against righteousness and the truth and like all your principles. Like, the church sets up so many false dichotomies where it's like, you have to do this thing to be true to the church or you're a bad person, and that's the only choice you have. It's like so messed up. And I have a whole podcast on this at Mormonish. Like, the only way you can make that choice over the church is if the belief is so painful in your daily life, like having a child of your own that struggles with this. That's the only time the pain is high enough so you can finally override that back of your mind programming of like, this is what truth is, this is what righteousness is. If I have principles, I have to do this even though it's hard type mentality. It's so hijacking of your brain.
It's pharisaical, and at least the elder Gong will have a meal with his child, but he won't let him tell anybody about it.
I was just going to
Yeah.
say, wouldn't it be interesting to have an open discussion with Dean Christopherson and Jared Gong and compare their responses to, say, a Dallin Oakes or a Boyd Packer?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. Right on. Yes.
And I
Yes.
think part of it is that fallacy of like valuing the next life over this one. They all believe that everything's going to work out in the next life, and that, the kids are going to be, they're going to see the truth in the next life. And so even if it is my child or my grandchild,
Oh.
that, the next life, they're going to know that they were wrong, blah, 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 whatever. And just completely discarding how important the time and the relationships are right now, because what if this is all we get?
Remember though that they teach that you chose this in the pre-existence. So how does that square with you're going to find out when you die that you were wrong? If they really believe that you chose these things to experience them in the pre-existence, like the good and the bad that you go through, and you die and you're going to know you were wrong. Well, if I chose to be gay in this existence, and then you expect me when I die to know I was wrong when I chose it before I was born, that makes no sense.
No, there's so much contradictory,
Exact teachings.
doctrine. There's no reconciling it, because if
You
I
can't.
chose this struggle, and what they sometimes still refer to as, the struggle of having same-sex attraction, as opposed to, this is how God made you. it still implies that there's a choice to it, or it still implies that it was a struggle that you were given to overcome in this life rather than just how God made you. And so there's just so much confusion and contradiction in what they say is the doctrine. It just doesn't make any sense at all.
Yep, there's something wrong with you. The only way to be happy is if you change or like follow the church program, and it's totally contradictory. You can't be happy in the church and follow these things with differentiation. If you are not molded after the church and you don't belong to that extent, I believe you suffer in the church. They're asking you to suffer.
Yep. And that was your struggle that you chose before this life. So you should just suck it up, suffer through it, and you're going to be rewarded in the next life. I'm gonna pull this exact thread back into the issue of AI. Was it somebody on the chats talked about how much could be accomplished with honest dialogue? Think about the honest dialogue that young people can have now about their belief system just with an AI. Okay?
Exactly.
Oh yeah.
And they want an answer about this stuff. They can just ask AI and get straight answers, much more straight and direct than they'll get from their divine leaders. Okay? This is like, I think it's an existential threat, not only to this institution, many institutions, governments. I mean, everything we know is in the process of changing right now. What it means to be human changing. I mean, it is absolutely outside of our understanding, in my opinion.
You're right.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, because AI doesn't look at it as anything strange or different.
Well, I know everybody's worried about the agendas behind the AI technology, but from my understanding, these will be self-correcting systems. You can play multiple AIs against each other and they'll argue it out. And I mean, at least you can go and verify this stuff for yourself at some point. It's so easy now that you want to have a genuine, honest dialogue with somebody knowledgeable. Just jump to your computer and open up a browser. Okay. I mean, we want honest dialogue. We can get it right now. That's why we're all here talking tonight.
Yep. AI is going to change the game, but it's still going to go in that category like the internet itself, where members are going to be inoculated. They're going to distrust it. They're going to say, don't go to that, source. And so the cycle continues.
So my understanding, FYI, I have friends who work for the church here. They've told me they're not allowed to work. They're not supposed to use any AI tools. I'd like to get like a more documentation about that. But
really,
think about what that means. If an institution forbids you from using an AI tool, from now on you're in the game. That's like saying you can no longer use computers.
Wow.
Think about all the times that the prophet of the church has asked us to go on a social media fast, and think about how that has coincided with harmful reports coming about him or his family or the church or other things. Hey, Diamond Dave.
Hey, Diamond Dave.
Diamond Dave, you put
Diamond
the A
Dave
in
and
the
Ulaanbaatar, check it out. Telling people not to use AI. I mean, it's basically the same as saying, like, don't go to the library. You're going to find some really harmful and tricky things there. It's like my bishop who told me, don't go to therapy because they're going to tell you some things that might just be, totally out there. And it turns out, that's what saved my life.
Diamond Dave, we are talking about the history of LGBTQ in the world, and how the church and
their influence
sharing our experiences
in present day. Yeah,
and
been down many rabbit holes in the last hour.
Yep. Know probably everyone on here except for Jared, who's sitting beside Megan. Jared is a new guest tonight. He was on our podcast last week. He was raised as a gay man in the LDS church, went through conversion therapy, the whole bit, And so his thoughts are very valid. And I want to say that in the research that I've been doing for the book that I'm currently working on, I've read hundreds of after death experiences that people have, or near death experiences, they call them. Some of them I think are legitimate, some of them I think are hogwash. But the ones that I think are legitimate, they only emphasize one thing, and it's love, love, love. They feel a, an incredible love all around them, going through them. They don't say anything about rules and regulations, and men can't be holding the hands of men, or women can't be holding the hands of women. It's just about love. And I didn't understand growing up with my dad, who was very anti everything. I couldn't understand what his issue was about two men or two women being together, because love is freaking love. And that's what it's about. What the world needs now is love, sweet love, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
But it
Not
has to
just
be
for
approved
some.
love. It has to be the type of love that the leaders are comfortable with. Anything that's uncomfortable, anything that's other, and the way they maintain their power is to otherize other people and to say, we're right, distrust them. We're very tribalistic. Anytime a leadership structure can otherize a group, it automatically maintains their power.
Forbidden.
It reminds me that when we get what we don't want, we start to see so clearly what we do want. And after being in conversion therapy on and off for 10 years in the church, and I'm just like, all these things you guys are saying are just so were my experience and so frustrating. But it placed this like desire in me to create this thing different that I want. I'm reminded of that show, Schitt's Creek, where,
Yeah.
where Dan Levy plays David. He's like a gay queer character.
Yes.
Well, Eugene Levy said, I was really touched by this quote. He said, when you're a father who has a son who likes to dance and twirl, you're so worried of how the world is going to treat that boy. He said, little did I know that my son would grow up to create a world where that was totally normal. And I love that so much, because Schitt's Creek has totally inspired me. I mean, it's season after season of a world where there's no homophobia. I mean,
That's right.
it's simple, but there's zero homophobia. It's so normal to be gay in that show. So I just like that thought of like, thank you, Dan Levy, for showing us this thing that you wanted to create after getting a bunch of things you didn't want. And the church has planted in so many, like the church is going to continue to plant in young people. And, this horrible, some people are going to love it. There's a payoff to being elite. There's a payoff to being self-righteous, and they're going to choose it, and they're going to march to their death with it. Other people are going to say, I don't like this. What else could I bring to? I mean, it's the very thing, our anger, our disdain, our incredulous just awareness that this even happened launches a rocket of desire that is so intense. What is it that we're going to create? I mean, this is something I ask myself all the time. What am I going to create that's better than what the church delivered to me? And I love that question, and I love watching people in history who created something better, or people that are contemporaries right now that are creating something better, that are inclusive, that are so beautiful. It just makes the church and all of the church's love feel so flat compared to the vibrant and inclusive love that others are currently creating right beneath our noses.
That's right. Some people want to help their surroundings, and some people move to Mongolia.
Well, the funny thing, you should mention that I'm actually going to be working with my fiance and her family to carry on the legacy of her father, who, among other things, he constructed the Chinggis Khan equestrian statue. And if you Google that, it's this big national monument. So there's going to be a lot of projects that are working on. I actually have family books behind me where the whole family was with the Dalai Lama. They spent time with him multiple times.
Wow.
He still has, he's passed away, but he's got a lot of projects that are unfulfilled. And so that kind of falls onto the next generation.
Cool.
So I'm gonna be busy doing that.
Oh, he made this big statue. That's big.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Are you looking at the equestrian statue?
Yeah.
Yep. That's it. That's it. Yep. Yeah.
Have you
So my
seen it?
fiance's father, not in person yet. But
Wow.
that's one of the places I want to go visit. And
Wow.
and then I have this like basically this whole book here where it's got pictures of the family and all the way down through like I think this is like the 1900s, I think. So it's like a family book. And
Wow.
I can't read it, so ChatGPT's been helping me, and my fiance is too because it's in Mongolian. But
Tim used to ride horses with Genghis Khan.
Oh yeah.
I had a really nice bae, I want you to know. She
Yeah.
was the best bae I ever had.
But yeah, so that's really what I'm going to be doing since you brought up
That's exciting.
the topic of like
Oh,
building stuff.
wow.
I know bits and pieces about like LGBTQ through history, mainly in India, because it's pretty predominant in Hinduism, and pre-colonial times especially. Now it's a bit more muted. Here in Mongolia, it's not really a thing. So it's not illegal to be gay, but gay marriage is not recognized. It's not criminalized, but it's not legal, it's not legalized either. And just from my short time being here, I've been here about a month. It's less on individuality, the culture, and it's more based on national pride. So that's something that I've been kind of adapting to. I'm kind of fluent with that already in some ways, like body language, because I spent time in India. But I'm glad I hopped on.
Thank
We're
you.
glad you are too,
Good to
Dave.
see
and
you,
I know
Dave.
Your
Yeah.
beard's getting longer.
Yeah, I'm gonna be like braiding it out when it gets longer and putting in some jewelry in
Genghis
it.
Khan style.
More Scandinavian style, actually.
Oh.
No,
I wish I could grow a beard like that.
it's a slow process. You might just need to pray harder too, Megan.
Yeah, you're right.
Maybe.
I haven't thought about that advice in a really long time. I'm going to try that again.
I know, right?
Maybe this time it'll work. After all this time.
So you guys been down some rabbit holes, huh?
Yeah, we've been down some rabbit holes.
Nice.
It's always fun.
It's always a blast.
It's always a blast, especially when the church is involved. Like it's like I've noticed just being the outsider, being a convert, and then leaving and moving to another country. Like this church has a really weird dynamic that just doesn't make logical sense, right? Like you go to other countries where the LGBTQ lifestyle is like frowned upon. It's like, okay, there's a culture behind it. There's a reason behind it. I may not agree with it, but there's a basis for it. But the LDS church is like, because this book says so.
Right.
And I'm like, where are we getting this from? Because the cultures even in that era had LGBTQ people as well, right? And they had people in society who contributed to society that were LGBTQ. So it's like, where's the basis for this logic? Like, it's just this weird, I don't get it.
It's fear. It's fear-based.
No.
It's all fear-based.
MB,
because they're different.
Sorry to cut you off, Tim. MB, no, I have not actually. My fiance did not know what Mormonism was, had not heard of the Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and her mother, who's very well connected, hasn't heard of Mormons, but refers just to Christians as Jesus people, and they're actually very looked down on here in Mongolia, from what little I've been told. So anyone, even if you claim to be a Christian, they will look down on you socially, from what I've heard.
Wow.
Was it Diamond Dave just asked, where does this come from? Where does the church's fear, or where does that all come from? Literally, right now, you draw history of the church, journal of discourses, the standard works, 10 or 15 major books, all of the conference talks. You could drop that into Notebook LM and start asking questions, and it will give you an answer. A sound answer based on all of that data. Okay.
It's the philosophies of men mingled with scripture.
Right.
It literally is.
Maybe we should do that.
That could be a fun episode.
I honestly, it really is as simple as, if you look at the power structure of any organization, you can also see where they loathe anything that threatens that power structure.
When I was at, oh, sorry,
ahead.
Megan.
Nope,
Go ahead,
that's all.
Megan. I thought you paused for a minute, because I was just going to say real quick, right along with what you're saying. I remember when I was a kid, there was a TV show came out with Billy Crystal. It was called Soap.
Yes.
Familiar with that? It was one of the first shows that featured a gay man openly. And I remember in sacrament meeting, they instructed us to not watch that show, not let their kids watch the show.
That's right.
You remember that, Tim?
I do. And I love that show.
With what Megan was saying, they loathe anything that doesn't fit right into their structure.
Yeah.
Well,
there was a letter that came down from the first presidency telling people not to watch soap. I remember that because I was in an elders quorum presidency, and the high councilman came by and showed it to us. Yeah.
Times have changed, because they won't come out now and tell people not to go to Preparing a People conferences. They won't tell people now to not participate in the Avow website. They won't tell people now not to participate in not to read Visions of Glory, not to participate in any of these things that are resulting in the harm and the killing of human beings. But back then, a sitcom was the big threat. So.
Yeah.
And honestly, I actually saw a post that President Nelson made on Mother's Day, where he was counseling the church members to think about Jesus's relationship with his own mother. And there were so many people in the comments asking why we can't talk about Heavenly Mother. And it's the same reason. We can't talk about Heavenly Mother because talking about Heavenly Mother distracts from the patriarchy. And we can't have people worshiping someone other than God, because, if we talk about Heavenly Mother, then that means that women have some authority, and that means that men are going to lose their authority. So, just the list of topics that we can't talk about or can't think about or can't accept all have to do with the men who are in power losing power.
So join us next week when we talk about Mother God.
Okay. Are you going to leave the chat, Jane?
No.
Or is it going to be Megan? Or is it going to be somebody else?
Well, it probably should be a woman. I'm just going to put that out there.
That's what I think. Yeah, I agree.
And I feel honestly, I feel a little bit oddly at home right now in this panel, because in the last job that I was in, 9.9 times out of 10, I was the only woman in the executive room around a table of men. And I felt kind of at home there, honestly, because any executive room that allows one woman among the majority of men is a place I want to be.
Megan, you feel oddly at home here because you are at home here.
That's right.
Thank you, Randy.
That's right.
Thank you.
Seriously.
Yeah. So
I think
Diamond.
Go ahead, Tim.
Diamond Dave, where are you in Mongolia?
Ulaanbaatar. Yep.
Well, the church is going to build a temple there, and they've got a meeting house there in Ulaanbaatar.
I knew about
Are they actually going to build a temple there, or are they actually just announced the temple?
Well, it was announced. It was
announced. Whether I don't. So I just got here. I don't really know the dynamics with the church in Mongolia. I don't know how that will go down, because from what little I do know, when you want to do anything involving building or business with government, there's a lot of red tape. And that isn't something that the church can just bribe away, because there's a lot of cultural like pride in saving face, and so I don't know how that's going to work, honestly.
The church is going to donate a 400-story tall Genghis Khan and a horse, and inside the horse will be a temple. It'll be a replay of
the Trojan temple.
Horse.
Is that the Trojan temple?
You guys are killing me.
Trojan temple.
Anyway,
we could put him on top of the steeples instead of Moroni. Maybe not quite so big, but yeah.
I mean, can we at least acknowledge at the end of this episode that on the top of almost every single temple is a cross-dresser? Can we just at least say that?
A cross-dresser with a trumpet.
Yes.
Really?
I mean, he's a dude in a dress playing a trumpet. Like, how much more LGBTQ could that possibly be?
Perfect.
I've never thought about it that way, and now that I'm seeing it, I cannot unsee it, and I don't know how to respond to this new information.
But most people wear dresses. Most people in the Middle East, that's how they dress. They dress in
I thought it was a robe, but I mean, sure.
It's a robe. Yeah.
It is a robe, but it's also a dress. Come on.
I would love to wear what they wear in the Middle East. I love dressing comfortable, and I'm in. I don't care. You know, if you see me go to the grocery store, I wear these flamboyant outfits, and like purple glasses with matching outfit and everything, and wild shorts, and I take it as a compliment if people think I'm gay. I really do.
Cool.
If people think I'm gay, I take that as
So what?
That's right.
Well, I just want to say, out of the 24 people watching, at least one of them has to be from the Strengthening the Church Members Committee. And if you, one person, would please take this back to the church leadership to say that there is nothing more flamboyant than a man in a gold dress playing a trumpet on top of your temple. That just announces to the world that you love the LGBTQ people. And so let's please just take that back to the membership of the church and find out if that's really what they want as their representative on top of a building where only hetero marriage is allowed.
That's right. And Diamond Dave wouldn't fit on BYU's campus.
Kendall and Dave, I don't know if you both realize that I'm shirtless tonight, but yeah.
Oh crap!
Yeah.
Wow. Uh-oh.
Wow. My eyes.
He's going to get demonetized now.
Look at those rippling pectorals.
Yeah, I've been working on my pecs a little.
Yeah, if the one SCMC member is watching, can you remove my records? Because I'm really too lazy to find where you guys are at here in Mongolia. Can you just do it? Thanks. Like, I don't want to have to fill out forms. Just do it. Like, no hate, no animosity. It was a good run, but yeah, I'm really lazy.
At least let them know your membership number. You better have that.
Oh,
I gotta find that.
You need your membership number and the date of your actual confirmation, not the baptism, the confirmation.
I don't
Plus, you have to have it
either.
notarized.
Yeah, can you do that for me too, please? Just look it up. Thanks.
I'm happy to do it. Just give me a
Not
little
you,
bit
the
of information,
SCMC.
I'll find it.
I'm sure they
Yeah,
have
the
AI
SCMC knows it.
Yeah.
They know it already.
Sounds
It's
like a
kind of like the
project for
IRS,
AI.
where the IRS
one
like
click name removal.
Yeah.
Well, Tim's
What is
the one
that
that can
name?
break in and get the records we need.
Yeah, Tim's connected.
Confirmation date gate.
Oh, I wish.
So
well,
we
Tim seems
touched on a
thoroughly
little bit.
entertained.
Yeah.
We didn't even get into very much, the media's influence in our society. And I think really the soap was informative to me, that Billy Crystal could play the gay character, that some other characters that were straight in the beginning became sort of came out. And then there's, I mean, we could just rattle off, you know, like Brokeback Mountain, right, was something.
Right.
Modern Family.
Modern Family. Even
I'm still going to advocate for Three's Company.
Three's Company.
Three's Company.
Yeah.
What is the
Yeah,
one with
Three's Company.
Just Jack? What is the one?
Will and Grace.
Will and Grace.
Will and Grace.
And those help me be more loving, right? They're not to avoid, like Randy's congregation was told. It's, you know, what did Mark Twain say? World travel is
Breaks down the barriers to
prejudice.
Yeah.
It's like
He
death
also
to
said
prejudice.
that the Book of Mormon was chloroform in print, so I trust him.
There you go. He's got a good take.
Yeah, there's a lot of shows and isn't it funny that the gay characters are always the stars of the show, the ones that people like most, like Jack on Will and Grace, and like Cam and, you know, a Modern Family, that gay couple. And I know, what's his name? The bigger guy isn't really gay, and he's the most flamboyant, and the other guy is gay and he's the least flamboyant. But yeah, there's so many shows that feature these gay characters, and they are the most lovable.
Well, I don't know what you're talking about, because I was not allowed to watch things like I wasn't allowed to watch Family Ties because the best friend's character was named Boner. And
Huh?
I was not allowed to watch The Facts of Life because obviously the title of the show was The Facts of Life.
What?
Yeah.
By the way, Boner was his nickname. His real name was Erection.
Love it. On that
you
note,
kill me.
we probably should wrap it up.
And it is kind of funny. Like I remember people saying a long time ago, it's Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve.
Steve.
Right? When I was young, I would hear that about you know, gay is bad because of, you know, it takes a man and a woman, right, to create life.
That's from Anita Bryant.
Then we go to
Anita
the temple,
Bryant started that.
and who is it that makes the world? God the Father, Jesus, and Michael. 3 guys make the world.
Right.
So that's
Three's Company, I guess. There you go.
there you
There
go.
you go.
So yeah, we could end the show now. Say goodbye to everybody, and we'll have more. Who's in favor of doing Mother God, Mother in Heaven next week? Okay.
All those opposed?
I'm always in favor.
That's a good one.
Maybe.
I'll bring
Kendall, I
up
thought you were
research
voting
from
opposed.
David
It's-
Paulson when I was his research assistant.
It's on Megan then. Megan's going to do the
Oh, it's on me?
research.
Oh,
It's
okay.
on you. You're the
So the
woman.
backyard professor, maybe he'll come on. He was on a show that I did with the same subject, and we could talk about things. He's well read in a lot of books that talk about, you know, the original gods were goddesses. You know, all the old original things was, you know, the mother is the most creator, right? The most creative thing that everybody could see. And so,
Yep.
so it's really so misogynistic to say, oh yeah, we probably have a mother in heaven, but we just can't talk about her.
It's too sacred.
It's assholery is what it is. It's not even
like that word.
sacredity.
And
So
why
anyway,
can't we talk about our moms on the earth? I'm just curious.
We could talk about
I mean,
that too.
if that's a celestial rule, then we shouldn't be able to mention our mothers here on the earth.
At least not by name, because their names are too sacred to mention.
Well, my
That's right.
mother always had to go by. My dad's name was Andy Watts. my mother always had to introduce herself as Mrs. Andy Watts.
Exactly.
That always rubbed me wrong.
Jeez.
Yeah, that's the polite way to address a wedding invitation is to Mr. and Mrs. Andy Watts. You would never use the woman's name.
Yeah. Well, you know what? That's stupid. Let's
I
send
agree.
that memo out.
So for the people that are in the know, after we close this show, we still will be here for another hour talking. But,
It'll be
just
the
will not
after
be
show.
filmed. That way, Megan can swear all she wants. That's the main reason we do that.
Like it would stop her from swearing right now.
That's
Stop
right.
any
I
of
can
us from
swear?
swearing.
Are you
My
fucking
damn motherfuckers.
serious? That's
No, we're not. God damn it,
I'm not
Megan.
fucking
We're
kidding.
not fucking serious.
Oh shit, I'm sorry,
You
Tim.
can't. Oh shit.
So anyway, yes, MB, you can come.
Yes.
MB,
You can all.
You can also join us for the after show if you
You
want.
can all join us afterwards. You can.
No. Gene's got to set up a Patreon so that way people who subscribe for monthly amounts of money can see what we talk about in the
Yeah.
after show.
Hey, yeah, that's true. Yeah,
It's
that's
my
true.
free.
That's true. That's true.
Sorry, Church of Horror. I should have given a disclaimer first.
We should have told Joe to plug his ears.
It's after the witching hour for some people.
No.
That's right.
So anyway, thanks everybody for watching. Like, share, and subscribe. Do all the things.
Good night.
And we'll talk to you later.
Love
Bye-bye.
you, mean it.
Goodbye.